Welcome back, Coinology. The story of the 1975 1-cent coin begins not in the metal itself, but in the silence of a mint that never truly confessed its secrets. Among collectors, whispers travel faster than truth, and legends often find their way into reality through those who dream of uncovering what the world forgot. The 1975 penny, a coin that officially was never meant to exist, has become one of the most mysterious and controversial topics in the history of American numismatics. For decades, it has haunted the imaginations of experts, treasure hunters, and ordinary people who stumbled upon copper glimmers in dusty boxes, wondering if they held history's rarest artifact between their fingers. In the year 1975, the United States Mint was preparing for the grand bicentennial celebration of 1976. Designs for quarters, half dollars, and dollar coins were being modified to mark 200 years of independence. But the humble 1-cent piece, carrying the enduring image of Abraham Lincoln, was not supposed to change. Those who claim to have seen one described it as glowing differently under light, a deeper, richer shade of red copper, almost with an aura, as if the metal itself knew it wasn't supposed to exist. And yet, it did, or at least, so the legend says. Numismatists, the scholars of coinage, debated endlessly. Could a 1975 Lincoln cent exist? The answer, by the books, was no. But history has always found a way to slip through the cracks of official records. If a single die bearing the wrong date was ever prepared, if a prototype ever left the mint floor, even by accident, then one coin, one tiny disc of copper, could defy the laws of history and become the rarest American coin ever struck. For over 4 decades, the myth grew. Coin forums buzzed with across-amified government records and logic alike. Collectors estimated its worth could reach astronomical numbers, $9.9 billion, not because of its gold or copper content, but because of what it represented, the impossible made real. But what makes a coin valuable is not only its rarity. It is also the story it tells, the people who hold it, and the journey it survives. To understand the 1975 penny, we must go back in time, to the early 1970s, when America was changing faster than ever before. The Vietnam War was drawing to a close, the economy was shifting, and inflation was beginning to eat away at the value of money itself. Copper was becoming expensive, and the U.S. Mint was already testing alternatives like aluminum cents and steel blanks. It was a time of experimentation, transition, and uncertainty, the perfect storm for accidental or deliberate creations that would later baffle historians. In 1974, millions of Lincoln cents were struck, most from copper, though some experimental aluminum cents were made and later destroyed, or so the official records claim. As 1975 approached, mint officials focused on bicentennial designs for higher denominations, assuming that the penny would remain unchanged. But what if, in those months, a few dies were mistakenly engraved with the date 1975? What if a mint worker, unaware of the coming change, prepared a small batch before receiving the new directives? What if those coins were struck, bagged, and forgotten? Every myth starts with a single what if, and from there, it grows roots in the soil of imagination. The design of the coin, of course, was the same beloved Lincoln cent that Americans had known since 1909, the profile of Abraham Lincoln facing right, designed by Victor David Brenner, with the tiny VDB initials hidden on the shoulder of Lincoln's bust in later years. On the reverse, the stately image of the Lincoln Memorial, standing tall in classical dignity, with the faint outline of Lincoln's statue visible through its columns, a design introduced in 1959. The coin's symbolism was simple but profound: the unity of a nation, the endurance of a leader's memory, and the belief that even the smallest piece of currency carried the face of history. A real 1975 cent, had it existed, would have been struck in copper, 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin, weighing 3.11 grams, with a diameter of 19 millimeters. Its edges would be smooth, its surface reflective when new, and darkened with time if circulated. Yet those who claimed to have glimpsed one insisted looked slightly different, brighter, heavier, almost as though the metal used was purer than the usual alloy. Some even suggest that it contained traces of gold or an experimental coating meant for long-term testing, giving it that mysterious gleam. As the legend spread, collectors began offering absurd sums for even the rumor of one. Letters were sent to the U.S. Mint requesting confirmation, but the responses were always the same. 1975 dated 1-cent coins were produced for circulation, nor were any patterns recorded in official mint archives. And yet, the human mind finds comfort in believing that somewhere, hidden in an old roll of change, the truth might still exist. Stories emerged from across the country. One claimed that in the late 1980s, a retired mint employee in Denver had a small collection of experimental strikes, including one with the date 1975. Another rumor told of a yard sale in Kansas where a collector bought an old tobacco tin full of pennies, one of which bore the mysterious year before it vanished again into private hands. There were even whispers of shadowy auctions, private collectors trading fortunes for coins that could never be publicly verified. The value of myth is often greater than the value of truth. The 1975 penny became more than metal, it became a metaphor for the things we chase that may never exist but make the journey worthwhile. It reminded collectors that sometimes, the dream of discovery is as valuable as the discovery itself. Still, many refused to believe it was only legend. For them, there had to be proof, and perhaps, in a hidden vault somewhere, that proof does exist. Even as the decades passed, technology evolved. Coin grading services began to receive inquiries about 1975 dated cents, though none ever surfaced officially. But in the age of the internet, photographs began appearing blurry, low-resolution images of copper coins stamped 1975 with Lincoln's face. Experts called them fakes, digital edits, or manipulated impressions. But to believers, each new image was another clue, another heartbeat of the legend refusing to die. Why, some asked, would the mint deny such a coin's existence? The answer, if there is one, might lie in bureaucracy, secrecy, or simple embarrassment. Admitting that a coin was struck accidentally could undermine trust in the precision of minting operations. Or perhaps, more conspiratorially, the coin represented a special strike meant for government archives or testing that somehow escaped into the world. If that were true, the mint might prefer silence to scandal. By the 21st century, the legend had matured into obsession. Online forums dedicated entire threads to decoding hints in old photos. Coin collectors made pilgrimages to shows, carrying magnifying glasses, metal detectors, and hope. YouTube channels began producing documentaries, sharing theories, and even recreating digital mock-ups of the elusive 1975 cent. Some videos amassed millions of views, turning an invisible coin into a global symbol of rarity and wonder. As prices for rare coins skyrocketed, fueled by viral stories and record-breaking auctions, the hypothetical value of the 1975 cent grew beyond comprehension. Estimates placed it at over $9.9 billion, a number so absurd it became poetic. But in the world of collectors, value is not measured by reason, it is measured by passion, history, and belief. In the deep corners of online communities, a few claim they have seen it, that it exists, locked away, passed quietly between private collectors and wealthy investors who refuse to reveal it publicly. To them, it is not about money, it is about possessing the unpossessable, holding a secret too powerful for the world to see. And so, the 1975 1-cent coin, whether myth or miracle, continues to haunt the world of numismatics. It exists somewhere between history and imagination, between copper and eternity. Its story is not yet finished, because as long as people believe, legends cannot die. They live on in whispers, in the soft clinking of coins, in the glimmer of copper under sunlight, and in the endless human desire to find S. They say every coin tells a story, but some stories refuse to be told in full. The deeper we go into the legend of the 1975 1-cent coin, the more it begins to feel less like a tale of metal and minting, and more like a reflection of human obsession itself. For decades, people have looked for that one copper piece, searching in flea markets, old drawers, and forgotten rolls from banks that closed half a century ago. And yet, no one can say with certainty whether it truly exists. But the smoke of rumor, as history often proves, rarely rises without a spark somewhere beneath it. In early 1975, behind the guarded walls of the United States Mint, experiments were quietly underway. The nation was preparing for the bicentennial, but within those same corridors, the mint engineers and engravers were also running internal tests for long-term production standards. Mints, like living organisms, must constantly evolve, testing new alloys, new dyes, new mechanical calibrations to ensure every coin that leaves the press meets perfection. Sometimes, those test pieces were struck with standard designs but unrecorded dates, and sometimes, by human error or oversight, one or two of those pieces survived. Those who worked there at the time, now old and gray, have told fragmented stories of certain trial days when dies bearing early date drafts were tested for clarity. One name, whispered often in collector circles, was that of a senior die engraver from Philadelphia who allegedly created a prototype die bearing the date 1975, meant only for calibration. According to one rumor, he struck just a few examples on polished copper planchets before the die was destroyed. But history never kept records of everything, and sometimes, the fragments that survive are enough to feed legends for centuries. If even a single 1975 cent slipped from those walls, carried unknowingly in a worker's pocket, swept into a batch of circulation coins, or stored among scrap metal that later re-entered the market, then the impossible could indeed exist. The idea of that one coin, lost in a sea of billions, has fascinated numismatists beyond measure. Consider the irony, a piece with a face value of 1 cent, yet a potential worth greater than entire national treasuries. How could something so small command such astronomical value? The answer lies not in its metal, nor in its age, but in its impossibility. Collectors are not just buyers of metal, they are seekers of miracles. Imagine a day in the mid-1970s, when inflation was rising, and the price of copper itself was nearing the value of the penny it composed. Millions of people used the cent daily, barely glancing at Lincoln's profile. To them, it was just a coin. But now, looking back, the thought that one of those ordinary coins might have been the most valuable artifact in American history electrifies the imagination. Many researchers have traced the supposed origin of this mystery to the Denver Mint, where large production runs often overlapped between years. In those hectic days, thousands of dies and planchets were shipped across facilities, and mistakes were not uncommon. The famous 1955 double die cent was itself a product of human error, a misalignment that became one of the most beloved mistakes in American minting history. If such errors could occur openly, why couldn't a single incorrect date die have slipped through unseen? In an era before computers controlled every detail, engravers relied on precision tools and experience. A single misengraved digit, a 5 instead of a 4, pressed during pre-production calibration, could have created the elusive 1975 mark. And once struck, even a handful of coins could have escaped into circulation before anyone noticed. The Mint, like any massive institution, could easily lose track of a few test strikes, especially if records were destroyed or archived without notation. If for decades, no solid proof emerged. Yet, in the 1990s, a story surfaced in numismatic magazines about a collector in Arizona who allegedly discovered a coin with a clear 1975 date while sorting through a bulk purchase of mixed cents. According to the account, he sent it to multiple grading companies, but none would certify it, fearing it might be counterfeit. The coin then disappeared, and the collector, frustrated by disbelief, supposedly withdrew from the hobby altogether. Some claim the coin still lies in a private safe, known only to his descendants. Others think it was stolen or sold quietly to a foreign investor who valued secrecy above fame. That same year, the Mint faced another mystery. Several coins with off-metal compositions were discovered, including Lincoln cents struck on silver-colored planchets meant for dimes. If such mistakes could occur and reach the public, what else might have happened behind those heavy doors? Over time, the 1975 pennies legend spread across continents. In Europe and Asia, wealthy collectors began to show interest, offering absurd sums for even a hint of authenticity. Private auction houses began receiving anonymous inquiries from clients claiming to possess one or to have seen one in royal or museum collections. One dealer, speaking under anonymity, once said he saw a coin with the 1975 date, faint but clear, mounted in a small display box during a private showing in Dubai. He described the coin as unlike any Lincoln cent ever made, with an almost mirror-like field and microscopic engraving differences. Yet no photos were ever released. Such stories blur the line between fact and folklore. But that is precisely how legends grow. They feed on uncertainty, on what cannot be proved but cannot be disproved either. The market value of a coin like this, hypothetically, would depend not only on rarity but also on provenance, the story of how it surfaced. If authenticated, the world would see the first truly priceless modern coin. Experts have speculated that in the feverish auction environment of rare numismatics, it could surpass any record ever set, reaching values approaching $10 billion, not merely as a collectible but as a cultural artifact. But there's another layer, a psychological one. The 1975 penny symbolizes humanity's unending chase for lost perfection. It represents the belief that even in a world ruled by machines and regulations, accidents can still create beauty. It whispers to us that somewhere, beyond the catalogs and certifications, there are still mysteries left unsolved. Among coin historians, a few argue that the existence of such a coin would expose flaws in mint documentation and shake public confidence in the system's precision. While such ideas stretch homes of small-town America, everyday people began checking their change, not for money but for magic. Children asked their grandparents for old jars of coins, treasure hunters scanned parking lots and beaches, metal detector hobbyists listened for that faint signal that could change a life forever. The 1975 penny became not just a collector's dream, but a cultural myth, a reminder that even the smallest object could hold infinite value if it carried the right story. And so, the legend lived on through generations, strengthened not by discovery but by desire. Each year, more people join the hunt, convinced that the world's rarest coin might still be out there, waiting in an unsearched attic box or an estate sale jar. And each time a collector picks up a 1974 or 1976 cent, the mind wonders, what if the next one is the missing link? In the history of currency, few myths have held such power for so long. The 1975 penny has become more than a coin. It is a symbol of the unknown, the intersection where myth meets metal, and belief becomes its own kind of currency. But this legend, like all legends, must have an origin deeper than rumor. Somewhere, buried in the archives of government paperwork, lies the truth, hidden memos, forgotten letters, or internal reports that might reveal whether a 1975 dated die was ever created. Some say retired mint employees have hinted at its reality during late interviews, but no documents have ever surfaced. If they ever do, the discovery would shake the numismatic world to its core. It would rewrite history, challenge authority, and crown the 1975 penny as the most valuable coin on earth. Until then, it remains both everything and nothing, a story, a hope, a glimmer of copper light in the dark corners of possibility. But even legends cast shadows, and not every shadow is kind. In the next part of this journey, we descend into the darker side of the 1975 penny, the world of counterfeits, frauds, and obsession so deep it turns collectors against each other, where truth bends beneath greed, and where a single cent can destroy fortunes, reputations, and lives, because when so? For every legend born of mystery, there always comes a shadow, a darker reflection of human desire, greed, and deception. As the myth of the 1975 penny grew, so too did the number of people who tried to profit from it. What began as quiet curiosity in collector circles soon evolved into a full-scale hunt, and with it came a storm of imitation, manipulation, and fraud that would twist the story into something almost unrecognizable. By the early 2000s, the internet had opened new worlds for coin collectors. Online forums, auction sites, and digital marketplaces brought together people from every corner of the globe, those who had spent decades studying mint marks and those who had just stumbled upon the thrill of numismatics. In this new world of instant communication, stories spread faster than verification could catch up. And among the stories, none burned brighter or more dangerously than that of the 1975 1-cent coin. It started with photographs. Blurry, pixelated images appeared on early message boards, a Lincoln cent, its date unmistakably 1975, glowing red beneath harsh light. The coin's details were sharp, the letters clean, the image almost convincing. Each time, the poster would claim it came from a private collection or an old family estate. But when experts looked closely, inconsistencies appeared, subtle differences in the font of the date, spacing between numbers, the texture of the fields. Digital manipulation had made its way into numismatics. Collectors who had spent their lives chasing authenticity now faced a new enemy, deception created by technology. Counterfeiters realized that the hunger for the impossible could be more profitable than gold itself. Fake 1975 pennies began appearing on online marketplaces, sold to the desperate and the dreamers for thousands of dollars each. Some were clever forgeries, created by altering genuine 1974 or 1976 cents, reshaping the numbers with precision tools. Others were entirely artificial, cast from molds or printed using advanced techniques. The mint, once again, denied the existence of any genuine 1975 penny, releasing official statements urging collectors to beware of counterfeits. But the more the government denied, the more people believed there was something to hide. Denial became fuel for obsession. Soon, a quiet war began within the coin community between skeptics who dismissed the coin as pure myth and believers who claimed proof lay just out of reach. Forums erupted into arguments. Friendships ended. Careers in numismatics were tarnished. Auction houses refused to even list supposed examples, fearing lawsuits and reputational damage. Yet the rumors persisted. Somewhere, people whispered, the real one was still out there. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about validation. Collectors began forming secret groups, sharing information, pooling resources to track rumors. They traded leads like clues in a treasure hunt, a coin found in an old safety deposit box, another seen briefly at an estate auction before being withdrawn. Each new sighting reignited hope. Each debunking only deepened the mystery. In 2008, a well-known private dealer in California announced that he had acquired a possible 1975 test strike. It was said to have come from a retired mint technician's family, kept hidden for over 30 years. The coin was shown briefly to a small group of trusted experts. It weighed exactly 3.11 grams, made of copper, with all the correct design details. But the date, they claimed, looked almost too perfect, as if it had never been touched by circulation. A few believed it was real. Others dismissed it as another masterful fake. The dealer vanished from the public eye not long after. The coin was never seen again. Some say it was sold privately for millions. Others whisper it was confiscated by the government, though no record of such an action exists. But the incident reignited worldwide interest. News channels covered it, YouTube documentaries speculated, and the legend flared back to life. The 1975 penny was no longer just a collector's fantasy, it was now a global mystery. Every great treasure hunt has casualties. In the following years, people spent their savings chasing rumors. Marriages ended. Lives fell apart. For some, the search became a calling, a spiritual quest. They weren't looking for a coin anymore, they were looking for meaning, and in that sense, the 1975 penny became something more profound than anyone expected. It became a mirror of human nature. It revealed how fragile the line is between curiosity and obsession. How quickly a harmless dream can turn into madness when driven by the promise of fortune. One man, an elderly collector from Ohio, reportedly spent the last years of his life cataloging every 1970s cent he could find. He filled notebooks with observations, scanning tens of thousands of coins under magnification. He died believing he was on the verge of finding the real one. His family, when cleaning his home, found his journals hundreds of pages of handwritten theories about mint variations, strike patterns, and secret test runs. Number 1975 penny was among them, but his notes became a kind of scripture among believers. In recent years, digital artists and counterfeiters alike have only made the story more complex. With 3D modeling and ultra-precise engraving tools, replicas of the 1975 cent now exist that even experts find difficult to identify at first glance. Some sell for thousands, openly advertised as fantasy coins. Others are quietly passed off as authentic, feeding the cycle of greed and gullibility. But the most haunting part of the legend isn't the fakes, it's the possibility that one real coin may indeed exist. Even the most skeptical numismatists admit that in a century of minting history, a handful of undocumented coins have surfaced that were never meant to exist. From 1913 Liberty nickels to 1943 bronze cents, every impossible coin has, at some point, turned out to be real. Could the 1975 penny be one more forgotten chapter waiting to be uncovered? To this day, researchers continue to dig through government archives. Freedom of Information Act requests have been filed, though most responses come back empty or redacted. The Mint maintains its official stance: number 1975 1-cent coins were struck for circulation or testing. But legends, once born, never truly die. In underground collector meetings and invitation-only exhibitions, rumors persist of shadowy trades. A few high-net-worth individuals are said to own pieces they refuse to display publicly, claiming they have something the world isn't ready to see. The mere mention of the 1975 penny in those circles draws a quiet nod and acknowledgement of something that lives just beyond proof. The market value attached to such an object has become symbolic, the $9.9 billion figure repeated endlessly online, a mix of exaggeration, myth, and poetic truth. It's not about the money, it's about what that number represents, the ultimate treasure, the coin that shouldn't exist but perhaps does. Collectors have a phrase: the chase is the reward. In the story of the 1975 penny, that saying takes on a deeper meaning. The coin may never surface. It may never be confirmed. But the legend drives people to look closer, to study harder, to find wonder in the smallest details. It reminds them that even in a world mapped and measured, mysteries can still exist, small, shining, and unyielding, and so, the legend endures, carried by those who refuse to stop searching. Somewhere, in the endless flow of coins, perhaps one still glimmers with a year that was never meant to be struck, a silent witness to history's hidden chapters, a single cent that defies every rule written by man. But the deeper question remains: what happens if it's ever found? Would it unite the collecting world or destroy it? Would it prove the impossible, or simply end a dream that's kept generations enchanted? As Part 3 closes, we stand on that edge between belief and discovery, between the myth that defines us and the truth that eludes us. Because sometimes, the greatest stories are not about what is real, but about what we choose to believe. In the modern age, where information travels faster than light and secrets rarely survive a single headline, the mystery of the 1975 1-cent coin has refused to die. It has adapted. It has evolved. What began as a whisper in collector circles has become a digital enigma, stretched across decades and carried on the invisible threads of the internet. By the time the world entered the 2020s, numismatics had transformed into something entirely new. Artificial intelligence could analyze microscopic surface details, blockchain could authenticate ownership, and 3D scanning could reveal imperfections invisible to the human eye. Yet, even with all that progress, the 1975 penny continued to stand outside technology's reach, a ghost no machine could capture. Around this time, a new generation of investigators emerged, young, ambitious, armed with data instead of magnifying glasses. They gathered in online forums, discussing every known coin, tracing production records, studying serial batches of dies, and building massive databases of anomalies. But again and again, the pattern returned to 1975, a void in the record, a missing link in time. One researcher, a former data analyst from Chicago, dedicated years to mapping every die variation from the 1970s using high-resolution imaging. When his project concluded, he noticed something strange: faint statistical gaps in production data from late 1974, suggesting that a small number of unrecorded test strikes may have occurred. He never claimed to find a 1975 penny, but he called it a hole in history, a blank spot where something should have existed. That phrase spread like wildfire. The hole in history. It became the new name for the 1975 mystery, the absence that defined an entire generation of collectors. Meanwhile, the market had grown wilder than ever. Rare coin prices reached staggering heights, driven by investors seeking stability in tangible history. People weren't just buying coins, they were buying stories. And no story was greater than the 1-cent piece that defied time. Documentaries multiplied. Podcasts dissected the theories. News networks called it America's most valuable rumor. In 2023, a quiet revolution began. A tech company specializing in AI-based numismatic authentication announced a secret partnership with several private collectors to scan coins believed to be unlisted prototypes. Among them, according to insiders, was a copper cent with the date 1975. The company refused to comment, but leaked documents suggested their algorithms detected metallurgical patterns inconsistent with both 1974 and 1976 issues, as if the coin had been struck on an experimental alloy. Nothing was proven. Nothing was denied. The legend breathed again, and through it all, the emotional core of the story deepened. For some, the 1975 penny had become a symbol of lost craftsmanship, a reminder of an age when humans, not machines, touched every creation. For others, it represented rebellion against authority, a secret that the official record couldn't control. And for the dreamers, it remained a beacon of hope, proof that magic could still exist in a world built on facts. Collectors began to speak not of the coin's value but of its meaning. They compared it to the lost masterpieces of art, the vanished manuscripts of history, the unsolved riddles that keep humanity reaching beyond reason. The 1975 cent had transcended currency. It had become an idea, a testament to how belief itself gives value to the worthless, but in this new digital world, belief is fragile. Where myth meets algorithm, truth becomes harder to recognize. Scammers, once limited by tools, now used AI to create forgeries so perfect that even experts hesitated to judge. They simulated wear, toning, reflection, even the microscopic flow lines caused by real mint pressure. For every advance in detection, there was an equal advance in deception. In 2024, one fake shook the community to its core. It appeared at a private European auction, authenticated by two respected examiners, and sold for nearly $100 million. Months later, forensic tests revealed it to be an intricate forgery, the date surgically re-engraved at the atomic level using laser modification. The scandal sent shockwaves through the industry. Reputations crumbled, lawsuits followed, and collectors realized that the line between myth and manipulation had vanished, yet, paradoxically, the revelation did not kill the legend. It made it stronger. Because if such lengths were taken to fake it, maybe the real one truly existed. Why forge something that never was, unless it had once been? And so the story persisted, in documentaries, in online debates, in the quiet spaces where hope refuses to die. Deep in Washington, historians and mint archivists revisited the files once thought irrelevant. Old correspondence between mint directors surfaced, some mentioning unauthorized die prototypes from the mid-70s. Most of the documents were mundane, but one contained a single, chilling line: ensure that all 1975 Lincoln cent dies are destroyed following test impressions. No test impressions were ever listed in the official log. That one sentence reignited everything. Could the legend have been true all along, that a handful of coins had indeed been struck, only to vanish into secrecy before release? Across the world, collectors stared at that phrase, wondering if the truth had been hiding in plain sight for half a century. Some saw it as confirmation, others saw it as coincidence. But everyone felt its weight. The truth, if it ever emerges, might change nothing, and yet, everything. If one genuine 1975 penny surfaced tomorrow, authenticated beyond doubt, its worth would transcend any market value. It would represent defiance against time, bureaucracy, and logic itself. It would become humanity's most expensive mistake, or its greatest miracle. As the world stands now, the legend of the 1975 1-cent coin has become timeless. New generations continue the search, scanning their change, digging through family keepsakes, watching old documentaries in dark rooms, dreaming of copper miracles. They may never find it, but in searching, they discover something greater, the beauty of mystery itself, for perhaps that is what this coin truly symbolizes, the persistence of wonder. The belief that even in a universe mapped by data, there are still stories that escape explanation. A single cent that refuses to fade, a ghost of history that teaches us that some secrets, no matter how small, can echo louder than all the gold in the world. And as the credits of this modern legend roll on, one truth remains: the 1975 penny, whether myth or memory, will forever remind humanity that sometimes, the most valuable things are not the ones we hold, but the ones we never stop looking for. In the end, legends never die, they evolve. As the decades passed, the story of the 1975 1-cent coin became more than a collector's dream. It turned into a mirror held up to humanity itself. It reflected our desire for discovery, our hunger for value, our endless pursuit of meaning in the smallest fragments of the past. Every generation inherits its own mysteries. For the world of coins, the 1975 cent has become the eternal one, the ghost that refuses to vanish. It is whispered about in classrooms, debated in collector conventions, and studied in late-night online discussions that stretch across continents. To some, it remains a phantom; to others, an inevitable truth waiting to emerge when history is ready. By 2030, the story had transcended numismatics entirely. Sociologists, artists, and philosophers began referencing it as an example of belief's power, how a community's shared imagination can turn metal into myth. Museums created exhibitions titled The Missing Year, where they displayed 1974 and 1976 coins side by side, leaving a small, empty pedestal between them labeled simply 1975, lost, or never born. Visitors often lingered at that empty space longer than at the coins themselves. Some stared at it silently, as if hoping the missing cent might materialize. Others smiled, realizing that absence can sometimes be the most powerful presence of all. Among the world's coin hunters, a quiet philosophy took root, that the true treasure isn't the coin itself, but the pursuit, the hours spent searching, the spark of hope each time a penny clinks onto a table. In an age drowning in instant information, the 1975 mystery reminded people of the joy of wonder, the kind that algorithms could never generate. In a small town in Pennsylvania, an elderly collector named Richard Halsey became a symbol of that hope. He had spent 50 years searching for the coin, amassing thousands of pieces, all carefully catalogued. In 2031, shortly before his passing, he left a note inside his collection: "If I never find it, that's fine. The search was the richest part of my life." That note was published online and became viral across generations. It inspired documentaries, podcasts, even films, not about money, but about purpose. Because behind every legend, there are people who choose to believe. Meanwhile, technology continued to push boundaries. Quantum imaging allowed experts to detect molecular signatures in metal composition with unmatched precision. Digital historians began reconstructing mint production records using recovered fragments of microfilm and handwritten memos. Each discovery added another layer, another piece of the puzzle, and yet the center remained missing somewhere, hidden in a private collection, in a safe deposit box, or perhaps buried beneath decades of dust in an attic. There might exist that single elusive coin, copper gleaming faintly, bearing the impossible date, 1975. Its weight would be the same as any other penny, 3.11 grams of ordinary metal. And yet, its weight in human meaning would be incalculable, because value, after all, is not measured in dollars. It's measured in the stories we tell. The 1975 cent is worth $9.9 billion not because of its metal, but because of its myth, because it reminds us that imagination can turn the smallest thing into eternity. Across the globe, artists began creating conceptual works inspired by the coin. Painters depicted glowing copper discs floating in endless voids. Musicians composed ambient symphonies titled 1 Cent Forever. Writers used it as metaphor, a stand-in for lost love, forgotten dreams, or the fragile line between truth and illusion. What started as a numismatic curiosity had evolved into a cultural symbol. Universities added the 1975 cent phenomenon to cultural studies curricula. Economists analyzed how belief could inflate intangible value. Psychologists studied the emotional attachment people developed to legends they knew might be false. The 1975 penny had become a kind of modern myth, a story born of fact, nourished by mystery, and immortalized by curiosity. And still, there were those who refused to let go of the hunt. Digital communities on the dark web whispered of sightings, blurry photos, partial images, vague coordinates. Some claimed to have seen the coin traded privately between billionaires under absolute secrecy. Others dismissed it all as digital illusion. In late 2033, a new ripple shook the legend once more. A retired engineer uploaded high-resolution scans of a penny he had kept since childhood. Under magnification, faint anomalies appeared. The tail of the 4 curved differently, the mint mark placement was slightly off. Experts were divided. Was it just a die error, or the impossible 1975? The debate raged for months, but as always, no proof surfaced. Yet, in that endless cycle of hope and disappointment, something deeper had happened. Humanity had turned a simple object into an eternal conversation. At this stage of the story, the penny was no longer a coin, it was a language. A shared myth bridging generations. A reminder that no matter how much technology advances, people still crave mystery. And so, as the documentary lens pulls back, the narrator's voice softens. The camera pans across countless hands holding pennies, old, young, rich, poor, all shining in the same copper light. Each hand turns the coin slowly, watching the year, the face of Lincoln, the promise of liberty and trust. For a moment, time feels suspended. Every person seems to be asking the same silent question: could it be this one? The truth may never come. The real 1975 cent may remain buried, or perhaps it was destroyed, melted into anonymity decades ago. But its story will continue to echo, because people need things to wonder about. Mystery keeps the heart alive, and maybe that's what the coin was meant to do all along: not to be found, but to be sought. To remind humanity that even in an age where everything can be explained, the greatest treasures are those that cannot. The documentary fades into its final image, a single penny spinning in slow motion against a black background. It spins endlessly, never falling, never stopping, reflecting light that feels almost like memory. The voiceover whispers, almost like a prayer, perhaps it's still out there. Perhaps it always was. A single cent, lost between time and truth, forever worth more than all the gold in the world. The screen fades to black, the sound of the spinning coin continues for a moment longer, then silence. The screen opens in silence again, the sound of faint static breaking the darkness, the echo of an old radio transmission, distant and haunting. Then, softly, the narrator's voice returns, steady and resonant, like the whisper of time itself. Every age has its relics, its enigmas, its symbols of faith. The pyramids. The Mona Lisa. The 1975 penny. And thus begins the philosophical turn of the story. As decades roll into centuries, what remains constant isn't the metal or the mint, but the idea that humanity builds legends because it must. People crave permanence in a world that keeps erasing itself. The 1975 cent became one such anchor, a spark of copper that somehow outlived its own reality. Collectors pass their knowledge to their children, and those children to theirs. Each generation tells the story with slight variations. One says the coin was forged in secrecy by a rogue mint worker, another believes it was struck as a symbolic protest, another insists it was an experiment in future alloys. The details differ, but the devotion never fades. In every version, the coin carries the same moral, that value isn't assigned by a government, a market, or a machine, it's given by human imagination. A 1-cent coin worth $9.9 billion exists not because of what it is, but because of what people believe it could be. Philosophers in the mid-21st century began calling this phenomenon the copper paradox, the idea that belief can generate worth out of absence, that myth can transcend matter. They argued that the penny story was a modern scripture of human faith, told not in temples or books, but in auctions and forums, through whispers and dreams. Meanwhile, scientists analyzed the psychology behind obsession, why humans cling to the impossible. They found that the thrill of the unknown activates the same neural pathways as love, art, and discovery. The brain, they said, is addicted to curiosity. Perhaps that explains why, 50, 70, even 100 years after its disappearance, the 1975 cent still commands awe. The film shifts to slow-motion imagery, dusty mint ledgers turning their pages by themselves, golden light spilling over rows of coins, a magnifying glass focusing on the faint 1-9-7-5 etched into shadow. Maybe, the narrator muses, it never existed in metal. Maybe it existed in us, a projection of all the things we wish were still possible. The camera pans across landscapes, abandoned factories, glowing museum halls, classrooms full of students holding magnifiers and pennies. The narrator continues, the 1975 cent taught us that history is not fixed. It breathes. It changes. It hides. It waits for the ones who care enough to look. And in that search, we find not coins, but ourselves. By 2050, the legend has fully entered myth. The coin becomes a recurring theme in literature and film, a metaphor for humanity's hunger to believe in miracles. A global movement called the 1-cent faith forms online, not as religion but as philosophy, a collective of thinkers, artists, and scientists who celebrate mystery itself. Their slogan, "To search is to live," their gatherings are quiet, candlelit halls where people place pennies on a table and share stories of things they once sought but never found. Lost letters. Unsent words. Forgotten dreams. The penny becomes a ritual object, humble, human, eternal. The narration grows softer now, reflective, philosophical. What is a legend, it asks. A shadow cast by light that no longer burns. And yet, even shadows remind us that something once shone. The film transitions into montage, the faces of countless seekers through time, a 1970s collector hunched over his magnifier, a 1990s kid sifting through his piggy bank, a 2030s historian scanning ancient archives, a 2050s AI simulating millions of coin variations. Generations connected by one dream, to find what might not exist. Then, the narrator pauses. A long silence. If someone, somewhere, still holds the true 1975 penny, the voice says, maybe they've already realized the truth, it was never meant to be sold. It was meant to remind us that even the smallest object can hold the universe. The background fades into the deep hum of wind. The camera floats across a vast desert, then zooms into a single glint of copper buried beneath the sand. The voice lowers to a whisper, perhaps it still lies hidden, waiting for the right moment, the right eyes, the right heart. Then, suddenly, a heartbeat sound, soft, rhythmic, echoing like a drum of destiny. The frame fades into a child's hand lifting a dusty penny, squinting at it in sunlight. We never see the date. The narrator smiles through words, and so, the story continues. The child flips the coin into the air. It spins. The sunlight reflects 1,000 sparks, as if time itself is bending through that copper surface. Maybe it's 1975. Maybe it's not. But what matters is that for one brief second, someone believed again. The music swells, strings, faint piano, the sound of turning pages. That is the true fortune, the narrator concludes. Not the coin. Not the number. But the belief that somewhere, in all this chaos, something perfect still waits to be found. The screen fades to black again. A final title appears, the 1975 1-cent coin, a mystery without end. But just before the film closes, there's one last frame, a microscopic close-up of a coin surface, showing an almost invisible 7 between the 4 and 6 of another penny, a secret glimmering for only a heartbeat before vanishing. The screen cuts to darkness, the hum fades, and then, silence. The film opens in darkness again, but this time the silence feels warm, not empty. The faint ticking of an old clock fades in. A narrator speaks slowly, as if remembering something rather than explaining it. Every search begins with a question. But the greatest searches end with a realization that the thing we sought was never outside of us at all. A soft piano begins. The camera shows ordinary people in everyday places, a shopkeeper counting change, a student holding a penny up to classroom light, an old man polishing a jar of coins in a sunlit window. For half a century, humanity has whispered about a coin from 1975, a sliver of copper, a heartbeat of history that may or may not exist. Some call it a hoax, some a miracle, others a mirror of the human spirit. But whatever it is, it changed the way we look at the smallest things. The screen shifts to a montage of headlines: the coin that shouldn't exist, the 1-cent miracle, copper faith, why the world still believes. The narrator continues, the tone soft but sure. Maybe the true story of the 1975 penny isn't about rarity or wealth. Maybe it's about the idea that even a single cent, a coin almost without value, can carry more meaning than all the gold in the earth when it touches the imagination of millions. We see a teacher telling students about how coins used to be hand engraved, a scientist explaining atomic structures of copper, a child listening, eyes wide. The film pauses on the child's expression, that look of pure curiosity. That moment, that flicker of wonder, that is what keeps us alive. Every mystery that refuses to die reminds us that there is still something left to hope for. That maybe the universe is not finished telling its story. The tone grows more meditative. When people first held the 1975 cent in their minds, they turned it into something more than metal. They turned it into a message. That message was simple: nothing is too small to matter. Nothing is too ordinary to hold a miracle. The music fades to silence again. The film shows the face of Abraham Lincoln on a rotating penny, magnified until every groove and scratch becomes a landscape. The narrator almost whispers, Lincoln's face has watched over more dreams than any monument. He reminds us of endurance, of patience. Perhaps it's fitting that his image guards the mystery that refuses to die. Now the imagery drifts through time: old mint workers walking home at dusk, machines clanging, light catching on freshly struck coins. Maybe someone in 1974 pressed a button they weren't meant to press. Maybe a single test strike escaped into the world, carrying a date that history forgot. Or maybe it never happened at all. But in every telling, we rediscover something sacred, the joy of not knowing. The narrator breathes, then continues, human beings live between certainty and wonder. We build facts so we can stand, but we build myths so we can dream. The 1975 penny is one of those rare myths that refuses to fade because it reminds us of what we lost when everything became knowable. Images of glowing city lights flicker, billions of tiny copper dots shining in darkness. In every hand that holds a penny, there's a story of labor, of time, of generations. Maybe that's why we care so deeply. Because this little circle of metal has touched every life at least once. Because it connects us, rich and poor, past and present, in one quiet, endless loop. The music swells again, faint strings, a slow heartbeat rhythm. And perhaps that's why the myth endures. Because deep down, we all want to believe that something extraordinary could still be hiding in plain sight. The scene cuts to a field at dawn. A young girl bends down, picks something small from the soil. The camera zooms close, a penny, covered in dew. The light catches it just right, the date blurred, unreadable. She smiles. The search is never really about finding, the narrator says softly. It's about remembering that searching is part of who we are. The camera lingers on her smile as the world brightens behind her. The music slows, fading into one long sustained note, almost like a sigh. Maybe that's the real worth of the 1975 penny. It doesn't buy anything. It simply asks us to keep looking. Fade to black. The film opens on a slow sunrise over the surface of an old penny. The copper glows as if it remembers every hand that ever held it. The narrator's voice returns, lower now, calm and sure. When the sun touches copper, it always looks a little older, a little wiser. Maybe that's why we keep coming back to it, the color of memory itself. A long pause. The faint sound of wind. Then the camera drifts across time, mint workers in 1909 shaping Lincoln's first profile, families counting coins in 1933, children trading pennies in 1950, a collector in 2025 holding one under a microscope. Every mark we leave behind tells the next person that we were here. Even a single cent carries fingerprints of history. But the 1975 cent, if it ever truly existed, carries something more, the proof that even absence can leave a trace. The screen fades to black and then fills with stars. The narrator continues, time is a circle, like the edge of a coin. It spins, it glints, it falls, it lands, and one day it's picked up again. The year changes, the faces change, but the need to wonder never does. Cut to a quiet museum late at night. Security lights hum. In a glass case sits an empty stand labeled 1975 Lincoln cent unknown. Dust floats like tiny constellations. Perhaps one day a real coin will sit there. Or perhaps the empty space is the truest exhibit of all. Because what we imagine often lasts longer than what we can hold. The music turns gentle, piano and cello. The narrator's tone softens further. In the end, the 1975 penny became a story about us. About how we measure worth, how we chase certainty, how we cling to hope. It taught us that the smallest thing can remind us of the infinite, and that mystery, real or imagined, is the heartbeat of every civilization. Images flow, a spinning penny dissolving into the rings of Saturn, a ripple in water, a circle of light around an eclipse. Maybe the true coin is the one inside the mind, the one stamped with every moment we dared to believe in something impossible. Then, a whisper, close your eyes. Think of the year 1975. Somewhere in the folds of memory, a coin turns, catching light that has traveled 50 years to reach you. The screen fades to pure white. We may never find it, the voice says, but we will always feel it. Fade out. The last sound is a single penny falling onto a wooden table, one clear ring, then silence. The film begins with the sound of rain. Each drop lands on metal, hundreds of coins scattered across stone. The camera moves slowly, almost reverently, until it finds one penny resting alone, shining through the water. The narrator's voice, older now, carries a softness touched by awe. Time doesn't collect dust, it collects stories. Every generation adds another layer, another whisper. Somewhere among those layers, the story of a 1-cent coin became something far greater than itself. Images cross continents, a miner pulling copper from the earth, a mint worker pressing the first 1909 Lincoln cent, a collector in 2055 polishing a relic beneath a magnifier. From rock to metal, from metal to symbol, from symbol to myth, that is how humanity tells its story. We take the ordinary and turn it into memory. We take memory and turn it into faith. A child's voice overlaps faintly, repeating, 1 cent. One story. One world. The narrator continues. By the time the legend of the 1975 cent reached its 100th year, it no longer belonged to collectors. It belonged to everyone who had ever searched for meaning in something small. It became a parable told in classrooms, an allegory of patience whispered in cathedrals of science and art. We see an astronaut floating above Earth, a small penny taped inside her helmet visor for luck. She touches it, smiling. Even in orbit, we carry our myths with us. Because they remind us where we began. The camera turns toward Earth, blue, turning slowly, round as a coin. The planet itself is a kind of penny, copper in color, scarred, spinning endlessly through darkness, waiting for light to find it again. A pause. Maybe that's why the story still matters. The 1975 cent is a reflection of the planet that dreamed it, a world searching for proof that even the smallest thing can endure forever. The film moves through centuries in moments, 2100, 2200, 2300. Civilizations rise and fall. Machines sift through forgotten soil. One day, a robotic arm lifts a tiny disc from the dust, its surface green with age, the faint imprint of a date almost lost. And when someone, or something, finally finds it, the narrator says softly, it won't be the metal that matters. It will be the memory that survived long enough to be found. The image fades to hands, thousands of them, across time, passing coins, giving, receiving, connecting. That is the true currency of humanity, not copper, not gold, but connection. The music rises, choir, wind, heartbeat. The 1975 penny taught us that value lives where belief and memory meet. That every lost thing leaves behind light. And that, perhaps, we never truly lose what we continue to imagine. The last image is of a single coin resting on a stone ledge, rain drying from its surface. The camera zooms close, the date still unreadable, but the shine remains. The screen is black. Then, a single beam of morning light slides across an old wooden table. A penny rests there, still, its surface warm and worn. The narrator's voice is almost a whisper now, as if speaking from inside memory itself. Everything ends where it begins, with a small circle of copper, a story too stubborn to disappear. The camera moves closer. The details blur until all that remains is light reflecting from the coin's curve. We've spent lifetimes chasing this scent through rumor, through science, through faith. We've searched libraries, markets, archives, dreams. And after all the searching, we understand that the real treasure was never the coin at all. It was the wanting, the endless, beautiful wanting. The sound of wind returns, softer than before. Pages turn somewhere far away. The 1975 penny taught us that mystery is not a problem to be solved, but a companion to be cherished. It reminds us that even in a world of answers, questions keep us alive. Images flicker across the screen, a worker at the mint pressing coins in 1974, a child in 2050 holding one up to the light, a collector closing a drawer of memories. Every hand that touched a coin, every eye that searched for a date, every heart that believed each one left a trace. Together, they made something immortal. A single piano note rings, echoing like a heartbeat. If somewhere, hidden in dust or time, a true 1975 cent still waits, let it wait. Its purpose has already been fulfilled. It reminded us that hope, once born, never rusts. The image dissolves to sky clouds drifting, the horizon brightening. And so, the legend returns to silence. Not an ending, but a pause, a promise that wonder will always find new shapes, new names, new stories. A final pause. The narrator breathes one last line, 1 cent. One dream. Forever turning. The penny spins slowly across the table, glints once in the sunlight, and the sound fades, a black screen at silence.